Hi Dipti, hi everyone.
Hi, Shikambri.
Good, good.
Hi everyone.
Okay, I think I'm going to get started. We have a quorum with at least 40 people. More will come in. But good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the second masterclass in our series of Measuring Insights. A close group of a lot of measuring experts and PRCI came together to build this series. We felt advocacy on this important topic is critical with the way the industry is changing and measurement and impact measuring that is becoming so critical. So today we have the team from Meltwater, Sanchi Shukla here. Sanchi has been part of this group. We've put together an amazing lineup of speakers, and I'll have Sanchi introduce our next guest today. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce Sanchi. Sanchi has nearly a decade of experience working with a lot of clients in India. She's leading strategic initiatives at Meltwater India, and she partners with a lot of brands to make sure that there is success, there's understanding of measurement and implementations with the teams to ensure seamless adoption of long-term impact. She's worked with CXOs, senior stakeholders, so she really understands how the tangible value and measurement is critical and is helping integrate digital intelligence and media analytics into the communication and business strategies they develop. Her focus is on driving value, fostering these relationships, and supporting the organizations in every stage. And today we are excited to have Ramnath Bojeesh with us. I'm going to hand over to Sanchi to introduce him.
Thank you so much, Deepthi, for that. And what an honor it is to be a part of this forum. Even I'm quite excited for the session which we have lined up today. But before we get into that, just wanted to introduce Ram. So Ram is the country manager for South Asia and India at Meltwater, and he leads the business and client partnerships across the region for us, which is the whole of APAC. He has a background in data intelligence, consumer insights, SaaS, and he works very closely with organizations so that they can help apply the media, social, and the consumer intelligence to actual business challenges. His main sort of, deployment focus is around turning data into action, and he enables organizations to make better decisions as well as strengthen brand performance and deliver measurable commercial results as well. So like I said, I'm also quite looking forward to the session today. And now I will just pass over to Ram, who will lead our discussion today. And anyone who has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be helping, coordinate that as we come to the questions at the end of the session. So yeah, please feel free and over to Ram.
Right. Thanks, Sanchi. And again, as Sanchi mentioned, it's really a privilege to be part of this forum and do this series with you guys. I think, yeah, Sanchi's been gaining a lot of knowledge and a lot of insights from you guys. And I think we would be happy to, yeah, take this conversation and see how we can help each other. And obviously, with the changing era of AI is concerned. Without further ado, I know we have a lot of content to go through, and it's about getting to close to 6 p.m. in Singapore. So I don't want to hold you guys back as well. But really excited about this. And I think we've got some really good case studies and examples on how we've done this. So we would want to walk you guys through it. And would love for this to be a lot more conversational. So just keep your questions coming in and we'll try and be as quick to respond to it and also ensure that most of these are answered at the end as well. Um, Sanchi gave a very good introduction, so I'm probably one thing that I'm going to introduce myself is just on a personal side of me. So I have a daughter, and which takes most of my time right now. But outside of work, I'm more in the mountains. I really love hiking and doing a lot of ski activities, and also play a lot of sports, tennis and jiu-jitsu. I think I've probably tried to set a goal for myself at least to compete in one open category of jiu-jitsu this year. So yeah, that's a bit about me. We will get right into the content for today. But before I wanted to jump into the content for today itself, one of the key resources that we've been using at Meltwater, and we've partnered with about 32,000 clients globally, and they use this quite a lot, either to help them prove value in terms of their investment, seeking budgets to their managements, as well as in terms of understanding what's really happening in the market and how is the market moving. So this is a report from VR Social, Simon Kepios, and Meltwater is one part of it where we provide the social data as well. So this is probably what I would say is like a go-to report for any marketer, any communications professional that we've seen getting a lot of insights into. So again, there's nothing in Meltwater's perspective to really push this, but we've gained a lot of insights and we've taken a lot of advantage on in terms of how we see the market moving, etc. So it's a 270 pages report for India, gives you insights into like what are the different kinds of apps that are getting popular, what is the share of attention, where do people spend, etc. So I'm just holding this for a minute. So it's a good resource to start with, right? And if you guys are keen, just download the report and get some insights onto it. But we want to start off with one poll question. Like we want to start with some engagements to get your phones going. Probably the question is like, what is the biggest change in communications that you guys are expecting it's in 2027? Like, as you guys are like communication professionals, it also helps us to understand like what you're thinking and what you're expecting as well. We would probably give everyone like 30 seconds if you can put in your answers. Yeah, could we see what the answers are? At least I'm not able to see the answers. I'm hoping you guys are able to.
So
Maybe.
we are able to see our own answer.
Oh, okay.
Or
Maybe what we could do is, yeah, we can collate the answers and then we can give you overview. But at least probably one of the biggest things that I feel changing that will change in 2027, having spoken to a lot of communication professionals, is how they look at attribution, especially in the new age, is going to be quite critical. Now it's not going to be about like, yeah, mentions or PR, ABE, etc. So we are seeing a lot of movement towards that, and that's something that's getting a lot of adoption across different enterprises that we work with on a global scale as well. Right. So the the whole topic for today, like how is the new era of reputation going to be with AI in the picture? And as we all can imagine, in the last 25 months, 26 months, AI has really been a topic of conversations in all our lives, and we can't put it outside of it, and we have to really address the elephant in the room, right? So with that being said, we wanted to start off with a quick case study, right? So this is something that we've been looking at, and we all know about this campaign, which started from the UK, but it's also an Indian brand, uh, not homegrown, but at least home acquired Indian brand. So Jaguar came up with a rebranding, which had nothing to do with cars and had a lot of backlash that happened, right? And even till today, so this is as of yesterday that we ran a quick understanding of like, hey, what's happening with Jaguar? There is still an impact on what people are perceiving even till today. Even the newest concept car that they had released, the 00, had really a lot of criticism in terms of like it lacked the boldness that it used to have. And it's nothing like a traditional Jaguar. and they attribute it to the everything towards the whole new campaign and positioning that has been done, right? So what we are saying is like the controversy somehow gets back, and we still feeling that it's getting drawn in attention, and whatever has happened in the past are still lingering, and these are being spilled out in the large language models and the generative AI models as well, right? But this is a typical traditional approach to communications that we all have been experienced towards. So it's a brand narrative that we start with. What does the brand stand for? How do we want to position a brand? What is the messaging that we want to put up? And then we use different mediums like paid, earned, owned, social platforms, and then creators came in the picture. So we use these mediums to go in and have a specific messaging that we want to drive towards the audiences. And we look at how those messages are received, either through engagement, either to measurement of deep resonance on a specific message, on the pull through of the messages as well. But the whole landscape has quite changed, right? So in a fragmented way, where AI has disrupted, PR is like really more complex right now, where you have ChatGPTs of the world, you have the Anthropic Claudes of the world, you have Reddit, where that's where most of the conversations are happening. And Sanchi is a vivid Reddit user who gets most of her trends and validations on her purchases from there. And you have obviously mis and disinformation, right? So people are going like because it is so easy to create content. Like one of our founders really told us, like, the cost of content creation right now is going to less than zero. Like, people can create content so much, so which means there's a lot of mis and disinformation happening. And the SEO, the traditional SEO that we used to have, like when people go in and search on Google or any search engine, no one is going beyond the AI summaries that are happening, right? So with all these different paradigms that are happening and disruptions that we've seen in the last couple of years, especially with like bot activities and where do people actually get their information from, here's how the new age is happening, right? So information obviously moves more fast right now, right? Public opinions are not just in a form of like established outlets and facts, but it's also getting from like people and what they're looking at. And narratives usually start in one medium and are spreading into multi-mediums. And this could be also trickling down to like agent AIs and models as well. And what we also know is like AI is helping in accelerating of content, amplification of content, optimizing of content, even in terms of like ad performance, etc., that we see. But very specific to India. In terms of like Gen AI usage, globally, India is number 4 in terms of like per capita range, right? So in the number of persons per 100 million is basically what they were looking at. But then when it comes to ChatGPT very specifically, India has the highest, and it's about 523 million people on average visit and use ChatGPT in India, and which means like most of this attention and screen time that they have goes towards it, right? And one of the key things that we are also seeing is like people are making decisions using these large language models, generative AI models, not just in terms of purchases, but also in terms of like forming opinions on brands as well. Yeah. So the reputation cycle that we've seen happening here is like this is for one of the brands that had a restructuring that was going on, but it got leaked on Reddit. So it first got leaked on Reddit, and then it was picked up by a news or a spokesperson where she sourced the story from Reddit and then proactively put this out. And LLMs are exactly going and looking at Reddit as like one of the key sources of information, right? So in that case, you have to be really casting your net wide and open in terms of understanding where all these conversations are happening. And not one source is probably going to be enough. Like you could look at influential sources as well, like, but Reddit is basically one of, in instance, at least Reddit is one of the ways where like most of the large language models are getting its information and putting those information out there for people. So what is the new channel mix, right? So it starts with social and influencers. Like you have creators. Now, the creators are not just part of like, okay, helping you to reach the larger set of audience and the target audience that they have. But now most of these conversations are community based, right? So people operate in like micro communities, and that's where engagements are like, what does the influencer stand for? And does the brand also stand for the same purpose and the same value sets, right? And how do you evaluate those influencers? It's not always about the reach or like potential reach and potential engagements and impressions that you get. But then you have earned media, which we all know, like journalists, publishers, credible resourcing, and trusted news that we look at. But all this is aggregated information into like generative AI platforms. And this was like in the top of the year that when we looked at the data, AI will shape about 30% of brand perception. So which means like most of people, either B2C or B2B, even in terms of like joining a company, we see like a lot of like one of the interesting use cases, like people are going and asking ChatGPT like, hey, I'm at this stage in my career. Is this the right company for me to join? Right. So there are different ways that like even internal comms are going to be using what are people actually asking about me. Right. So that's how the world is going towards, and we have to constantly evolve. And I'm saying one of the things that we have been cognizant of is like the landscape is changing every 3 months, right? And there are new models that are coming in, new AI. Sooner or later, what we are going to see is also like the shops that are going to be prevalent on uh, the large language models. So we already know like Anthropic and OpenAI are building marketplaces within their GPTs as well as their cloud coworks. So in that case, then obviously slowly ads are getting there. People are going to make direct buying decisions there and adding their cart and buying it right there itself. So we saw social selling and social commerce that was happening, but now we are going into an era of AI, like large language generative AI shopping, right? So with that being said, what are the key things that we need to address? So we know like the traditional focus has always been on coverage. So how much coverage that we can get? What is the higher, like, are we getting more mentions than our competitors? Is our sentiment overall being good, like mostly positive, negative? And then is reach, like, are we getting the maximum reach? And the reach are typically like, oh, what is the monthly unique visitors on that particular site or that particular publisher? How many people are coming into the site every day or every month, right? But some of the emerging questions for us to think about as communicators and professionals in that space is how can AI find us? How can we be more prominent with AI? So, and how to be more prominent with AI so that it can find us. And number two is like, it's not just about like mentions, but it's about like the right topics. So content pillars are going to be very, very key. So is reputational pillars. Like from a reputation standpoint, what are the pillars that your company needs to stand for? Like what is those 4 or 5 outcomes that you want to be tied down towards? And how are we being perceived and described by either on social or on by influencers or either on media and as well as like by the large language models, right? And then finally, reach is a good number to have. We've always used it. But one of the key things that attribution, when we talk about, is like, is it driving business outcomes? Is it having direct impact on my top lines or my bottom lines or my awareness? So that is going to be a key consideration that we want to look at. Yeah. So how do we measure in the new era, right? And I think that's the topic that we have looked at. So there are 4 aspects that we're going to be diving deeper on, and we have very tangible ways that we have worked with a lot of brands, and based on that, we've looked at metrics and ways to look at it. So and we're going to dive into each of them very specifically. So visibility, like, can people find us? So how do we ensure that we are being found in the most appropriate way? Relevance, are we being associated with the right topics? whenever people are searching or talking or even prompting in the right way? Are we being present there and being relevant to that conversation? Then going into perceptions. So how are we being described and evaluated? Are we being considered on the topics that we need to be considered? And finally, is it driving outcomes, right? So I think that's the four ways that we are looking at. So the first one. So what is visibility? So how often my brand appears? Where are they appearing? Right. And it's not just a single medium. So we are not saying that you have to go from putting your eggs on just like, okay, spreading your eggs into like social media, traditional and AI platforms, and then move everything to AI. That doesn't work either, right? So we have to ensure that it's a multi-channel approach. We're just saying that you can't ignore just one channel. And why does it matter in this current era? I think obviously we need to be discovered, not just discovered, but when referenced in the right way and recommended, because then decisions and decision making and considerations are happening in a new place, in a new platform and a new environment for people. So, like from a media perspective, obviously we've known this like reach, coverage, tier one coverage, share of voice is a very good metric. And also like we could put in an awareness pillar there. Number two is like when it comes to social, we are looking at mentions, engagement, social reach, share of voice, nothing out of the ordinary. But when it comes to AI visibility, that's where we're looking at visibility scores, prevalence scores, and frequency of conversations that we've been mentioned or being thrown out by the AI. So that's exactly like three different pillars that we would be looking at an overall level. And when we go into relevance, right? So relevance is like a degree to which your brand is associated either with a topic, like not just in terms of like, okay, a broader conversation, but very specific to the topic that you want to be associated towards. And what are the needs of your customers? Whether are we associated towards that? And also what the values that your brand stand for and how are we associated in those conversations. So those are like three bigger pillars. And why it matters is essentially its relevance and content signals usually come from like pillar works that we are looking at. So here, pillar volume is one of the key things that we would look at from a overall relevance is concerned. Share of conversation based on pillars, and then we usually see brands going into creating scorecards on okay pillars like okay if we are taking ESG as a pillar that we want to be throwing content around in that scenario, then are we looking at, hey, am I doing 10 points higher than my competition in the previous way? Or even by yourself, like if you set a target and your KPI towards be like, hey, my target, what I'm currently at is about 30 points, but by the end of the year, I need to get to 50. And that's exactly where we see people going towards. It's pillar sentiment. What we spoke about is like month-on-month growth that we are seeing. And also key message pull through, but from a social lens, it's more in terms of like the percentage of coverage that comes from individual messages from different channels. And then what we see is like a lot of the customers and the target audience that you guys are working with and brands are working with is across multiple different segments of target audiences. In that scenario, then you would need to specify where do we want these to come from in terms of like different channels, message penetration rates from channels, and then adoption by media type as well. Like that's like the overall different levels of mediums that we want to look at. And emerging topics, how can we be more relevant to the audiences on in our industry? How could we be understanding of like what are the topics that are getting more popular? And how would we be able to relate to it? How can we quickly churn out content and ensure that those are being gone out? And new topic clusters and understanding like topical growth as well. So when it comes to perception, it's a key one in terms of like whether your brand is understood in the way that you have set a forth to be understood, whether it's been described by either your your audiences or by the large language models in the way that it needs to be described. So it doesn't, like, what we know is like AI doesn't just surface brands, but it also interprets the narratives that have been happening on these forums, as well as like even blogs. Like one of the key use cases that we saw from an largest retailer in APAC is essentially they were having a lot of content that's been put out, but there was one very specific blog that the AI has been referencing to actually put them down towards another retailer. So it's not just like key influence that's coming in from Reddit or social media, but it's also like the smallest of blogs can be looked at. And this was from 2022. It's referencing all the way back as well. So those are ways that we need to be understanding where the references are coming in from. So that will define the perception. So top keyword associations, entity associations, that is going to be key. Positive and negative associations from a brand perspective, but also from a reputational pillar perspective. Volume based on like reputation drivers. So reputation pillars can be defined saying, hey, I want to be looked at my innovation as like number one in this current era. So whether my share of voice with respect to my competition on innovation on these particular topic is going towards the right direction. Sentiment driver as well. And competitive positioning, right? So in terms of like relative sentiment. So more often than not, we are only looking at our sentiment, but what about like relative sentiment with respect to a particular topic, driver ownership as well, and associative sense trend that's been like relative towards it. And finally, impact. And this is measurement in terms of like, okay, once we've done all this great work, how do we measure in the right way? So one is like obviously business outcomes led, like sales, leads, web traffic, bookings, applications, which we all are very aware of. But one key things that we also looking at is like PR impact score. Like a lot of brands are going towards like, yeah, impact score, which overlays their key objective data. And they are looking at a singular score so that they would be able to actually help move the needle on certain lens. So they don't want to have like multi different scores for like individual channels, like reach for social, AVE for PR, like traditional media, etc. So while as they want to have a combined PR measurement and PR impact score, which is getting popular. And another one is like audience perception score. And that is something that a lot of brands that we're looking at. And we did have an interesting one just this week in terms of like a public sector office wanted to come in for their PR efforts and said, hey, we want to look at it from a lens of a singular score, which means like we don't want it based on just topics that we are interested in. We want to look at it from a citizen perception as an overall lens for the policies that we are writing, for how there's citizen satisfaction that's there for my particular office, etc. So the outcomes can be customer satisfaction, customer engagement as well, but predictive insights also. So you have to always look at like where the conversation is going. So are there emerging trends that we need to latch on? But also there's like a lot of trends that right now. So which is the right trend for us to be investing in? How do you mathematically and also objectively be able to tap in on that? Opportunity identification, risk spotting, early signals that are there, ensuring that it's coming from all different mediums, and future demand signals that are going to be important for you to make sure that it's driving the right narratives for the right values that we have put forward as well. Yeah. Sorry, I'm keeping on going. So if there is any questions, do drop it on the chat, and we would be happy to answer that as well. So like now we want to look at a few case studies in terms of like, hey, modernizing your PR measurement approach. So how do we do that? And the first one is like, the first key takeaway that we have is include GEO in your intelligence. And this, like, I know a lot of brands have embarked on it. Some of them are way ahead. Some of them are just starting in their maturity journey as a core component of like measurement. So one is like establish an AI visibility baseline. So when you are starting off, you don't want to diverge your attention to many platforms. You can pick one or two and see, especially on like where your key target audiences are, and look at where the visibility, like where you rank with respect to the visibility. What are the key associations that you need to do that can help you in terms of driving it forward? Then measure and optimize those performance. So you start building uh, content around it. You start pushing content partnerships in terms of like the links as well as like the content, like the sources that you need to be present at. So that gives you like a visibility understanding. So having a visibility reporting is going to be key alongside and merging it with a media and social lens. And finally, number three is like understanding AI influence, right? So describe like how does your perception of your brand is going on an overall lens across the different channels, like social plus media plus AI put together, whether the narratives that you're shaping are getting pulled through as a key one as an output and for consideration for people to engage with your brand as well. So a quick question before we start as well, like what is going to be the most important value for PR in your lens?
So while we're giving people the time to poll round, so there are two questions. You want to take them now or after the poll results we can?
Yeah, I think probably I could take it now, Sanchi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's one very good question from Sarah, which I really relate with, and we have chatted about it on and off quite a bit, that for SEO, there have always been very clear guidelines about how to maximize SEO. But currently, as of how things stand, there's no such guideline available for GEO. So are there any indicators of what an LLM to choose or focus on that will pick up, for example, or the payoff of GEO is still a hit and a miss? So any definitive data on GEO ROI, which maybe you could talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Thanks, Sandhya, for that. And I think one of the key things that as brands we need to be really cognizant of, like not uh, divulging or going into a rabbit hole of investigating into across, like when you're starting at least on the GEO journey, is like to I mean, if you have the resources, absolutely yes, to go into like all LLMs. I think we have to possibly look at the top two or three LLMs where your audiences are most likely going to be using. And there is, if you look at Simon Kemp's report on the one that we shared earlier, which gives you based on like individual segments of like people, like based on uh, their age group, pretty much their demographics lens. So that gives you like where their which is their choice of LLMs or generative AI models that they're looking at. So that can give you like a starter in terms of like where you need to focus on. And there are obviously platforms and tools like Meltwater is one of them where you would be able to go in and see where do you stand with respect to your competition on a specific prompt that you like a customer would put in or like a consumer would put in, for instance. And that would give you ideations in terms of like the sources that there are and also how much of an lead off traffic and decision making has happened. And we have to be really creative in terms of like how customers would prompt. And then based on those regions and prompts, then we would be able to get the insights into like where the data is coming from and what the LLMs are going to be responding towards it as well. We do have an example that we could show you very quickly. Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Ram. There's also, one more question before the example, which I thought maybe
Yeah.
we talk about. So Nandita has asked that is there any way that we can measure stakeholder engagement? Again, something which we chat about quite a bit. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of KOL outreach, which means that there's aggregating stakeholders who make an impact to policy. And this may be to facilitate closed door policy discussions or organize panels to gather perspectives or come out with reports. And this goes beyond content generation and more towards actual influence with these KOLs that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or it could be around, let's say, or it could be around analyst relations. So any thoughts on that, on how to best measure this stakeholder engagement?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stakeholder engagements are now moving towards KOF as well, like key opinion formers. They are like you could see a lot of them on LinkedIn as well as like on different social media are being the voice of a specific topic and thought leadership. And I think that is going to be key in terms of like measuring like the impact and like what are the conversations, not just on their content, but also how the engagements are, like understanding their comments, etc., and the dialogues that are going in. And we've seen quite a lot of metrics and focus that's going towards like a particular stakeholder or a spokesperson of a bigger brand, and looked at it from a lens of like a few different lens, like trust, and trust and reliability, authenticity, and generally in terms of understanding whether the message is landing and whether the people are relating to it as well. But it is not what we've also seeing is like it's not just from one particular person in an organization. There are like a lot of people who are actually coming in to prove those and move up the same narrative. It needs to be a constant narrative that is unified amongst an organization that needs to be tracked and then proliferated and propagated in the right channels. Cool.
Thank you so much for that, Ram. And
Yeah.
I think Kasim has also sent a quick note that AMIC has also, along with a lot of experts, come up with a Geo Principal and Practitioners Guideline, and he's added a link to that, which is quite useful.
Yeah.
But we can come to the poll responses and then.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my vote was for trust as well. As you could see, the 56% of people really did vote for trust, and then the next one was authenticity. So what is essentially staying at the core of like measurement on PR is still trust and authenticity. I think that is still going to be the case, but it's going to be just looked at and measured from different lenses of like mediums and different ways of like how people are now changing their behavior and make those decisions as well. Right. So yeah, we already spoke about this. So this is an useful case study that we did, and we also have a framework in terms of like how GEO operates. So happy to also share that. I think we would be pretty aligned as well. So it's critical, obviously, to assess and optimize brands. So this is how we did it for a large telecom operator in here. So here, one of the key things is entity-based performance. So if you are across like multiple different bodies that you have, so you would be able to look at like your competition and see where's your visibility standing, how much is your frequency, what is your mention rate. Out of 100 times, 92 times you get mentioned in a prompt that has like which is the right SIM card to use, or which is the right broadband for me, what is the overall sentiment, and then this gives you an understanding of like where do you stand or with respect to your competition. And this is a visibility tracker. This is like one step at the top of it. Then what you would be able to do is like, okay, where is this visibility coming in from, right? So you would be able to go into a deeper level of insights. So for example, if you know most of your audiences are going to come from, let's say for SIM on, like I know in Singapore we have a SIM only plan, but like for example in India it could be like a prepaid plan. If let's just say most of those audiences are going to be from GPT, for instance, then you would possibly go in and put your efforts onto optimizing that in GPT. While as if you know, for instance, like if you have a CUG connection plan for your corporates in that case, or like for instance, for working at professionals who travel and have like international calls and etc. In that scenario, then you would know, like for example, if again it's an assumption I'm just making, hypothetically, you would be able to know if they were mostly going to be from Claude. Then in that case, then you would be able to understand like where do you stand with respect to Claude, and then you would be able to go in deeper. So for example, here you would know for Singtel, they are ranked #1 in DeepSeek, while as on Claude, they are really falling behind. And if you are someone in, like, let's say a Gomo, for instance, DeepSeek is quite popular. And as you know, we have a lot of Chinese nationals in Singapore. DeepSeek could be a place, like if you're looking at really creating very tailored plans, like, hey, what is the best plans for like China calling in that case, right? In that case, then you would be able to push it through DeepSeek because they typically tend to use DeepSeek a lot. And Perplexity is one of the biggest ones in India. So you would need to probably consider that as well. And you would also be able to go into like the pillar work when we spoke about that, right? So here you would be able to distinguish it, like when people talk about data, where does my brand stand? When people talk about network, where does my brand stand? Am I on the highest? Am I on the lowest? And that is how you would be able to distinguish based on the same pillar work. And finally, you could also see where those citations come from, right? So here we could see it's predominantly coming in from Reddit. So Reddit, it's getting a lot more popular as a source. We could also see like blogs like Money Smart, people, and also getting YouTube. So social and Facebook are also getting quite a lot popular. So in that case, you can't ignore your social, social presence as well, but also your earned media that's happening on social media, as well as looking at like open signal. Sorry. Yeah, open signal is basically which one has the highest connectivity. So people are like, if you are, let's say, assuming that if you are a Snowflake, for instance, or as a company, or in that case, or even an app like Swiggy, for instance, and if you want to go in and then put in saying, hey, on down detector, if I'm mostly down, then that also triggers the conversation. So you would know exactly where the citations are coming from for each and every LLM, and then that could give you an insight into like what is something that you would be able to look at. Yeah. And now we are also looking at like detecting emerging risks that would come in. So you essentially identifying reputational risk either from a misinformation before it's being reinforced and before it trickles down to like AI generated responses. How could you possibly be the first ones to know and not miss out on that? Monitoring the exact narrative accuracy. You would have a narrative strategy. You would have the key messaging strategy. Are these key narratives and messaging still going and reflecting the way that you want to be reflected in when people prompt about you? And then finally, strengthening your strategic objectives and narratives, like continuously optimizing positive content pillars and throwing content, being ensuring that you're constantly prevalent on those sources are going to be quite important. And that's how it will influence those AIs and the models that we are going to represent as well. Yeah. So we saw about, sorry, Sanchi, you're going to say something.
No, I was saying that there are two questions I think maybe more pertinent to the section that we were on.
Okay. Sure.
So one question is actually quite interesting and which is more around how there are a lot of organizations which do a lot of work in the social impact and development sectors. So in terms of measurement or relevance or perception, these are like these sort of metrics are more suitable than just clicks and downloads.
Yeah.
So how, especially because we are speaking about AI and GEO, etc. So how reliable is AI for analysis and perception of the data that they get through monitoring? More around, let's say, relevance and perception and those sort of metrics.
Yeah. So here's how I would think of it, especially if you are someone who is in the social space or in NGO or who is working across like public sectors as well. The question is not more in terms of like are people making considerations based on like buying you or etc. The biggest question that we are seeing is like, oh, when people are going to go in and ask those large language models in terms of like, hey, is this the right kind of social enterprise that I want to be associated with, either from an organizational lens or even from a personal lens. And I think that really shapes like a lot of behavior. Like even from a perspective of like charities, like people are also right now what is happening is like going in and asking, is this the right charity? Does this really go to the right people? And it's not, as you rightly mentioned, it's not going to be based on like the clicks and downloads or even like the number of conversations, but it's more in terms of like what is the overall perception of that particular enterprise or that particular social body that is organizing it. This, when you look at it from a public sector lens, it's very equivalent as well. Like they want to know like, are people trusting the policies, for instance, on that particular policy that's been, and what is the perception, and that is going to shape how people are going to be positive or negative towards that particular body as well, or that particular entity as well. So more than clicks, more than click-through rates, or in social um, social clicks, or even in terms of like impressions. I think the most important thing would be in terms of message penetration and pillar and narrative flow. So what do I mean by narrative flow is like you are constantly running as a PR professional, putting out narratives that you want the people to be perceived as a brand or as a public body or an entity. Is that trickling down towards the large language models is one of the key things that we need to look at it as well, like visibility, etc. And visibility could be one of them, but like competition benchmarking, etc., might not be as relevant of a sort. So it would more be towards like narrative pull through.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. There's another question more on the efficiency piece of monitoring. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that may not have extensive measurement, like budgets for a very extensive measurement framework or exercise. So
Yeah.
what is the most cost-effective way you would say exists right now, and especially now that AI is also into the ecosystem, to track brand visibility primarily?
Yeah, I think one of the key things for even like small, medium businesses, the key metric could even be as simple as like a share of voice in terms of their brand measurement, and also in terms of like their own brand sentiment perception. So the perception could be split right now into sentiment as well as like overall key message pull through. So it's essentially, I would say, the easiest measurement framework that most brands that I've seen in the SMB or the mid SMB space start with is like share of voice, but across not just on one particular channel, but either you do it manually or you use like basic tools to do it. It's still fine. Just to understand like paid, like from owned social media, as well as your GAO right now and SEO. There's some bit of SEO that still has its grounding layer to it. So I think having an overarching view and then having like a singular way to measure that would be still a good framework to start with for any smaller brands, so to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just last question before I let you move on.
Yeah, no worries.
Again, a very relevant one. I've thought about this question quite a bit, that there's a PESO framework which exists, right? Which is our traditional, and we speak about it,
Yeah.
in our discussions around paid, owned, paid, earned, shared, and owned. And in this regard, where do we put AI as a channel? I typically, in my conversations, I've always thought of AI to be like sort of like a another pillar, like a fifth pillar of measuring, because there are aspects of all, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well. This is a question from Vikra.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think probably an unpopular opinion and take on this is I think my view is just the PESO has expanded to a certain lens right now. The whole customer journey has changed a lot in the last, I think, yeah, 2 years especially. We don't just have to look at paid, owned, and social, like paid, owned, and earned, and uh, social. But I think the key thing would be also in terms of like looking at influence, because these KOLs and key opinion formers are having a lot more influence on your audiences, because they are trying to obviously influence brands and their considerations of people. So there needs to be influence in creators as well into it, the mix, but also AI. Yeah, AI, GAO or GEO or uh, AI visibility, it needs to be as part of it. So the framework might have just expanded to like two more pillars that would have like influence as well as like GAO into the mix of it. So because everything needs to be tied on, as you just saw, most of the citations come from Facebook's and Reddit's of the world, the blogs of the world. So that is how I would see like the whole attribution model will change as a whole.
Thank you so much, Ram.
Cool. So we saw how the whole GAO aspects of businesses are going to be changing. What are the different ways that businesses can look at it, like right from visibility to prevalence to also like narrative intelligence and narrative flow. But it is also important to not miss out on like what consumers are saying, because that is essentially also going to be one of the key ways. Like it's not only helping the citations from AI, but also the key voices of customers that are coming in from the on the brand. And this is not using a structured study like in, let's say, a focus group or etc. But this is voluntarily done, and this is like free insights and on consumers' voice of customers that are happening. And we did this for an airline, and just wanted to showcase to you guys, like when we talk about AI narratives, like how do you as a brand track those in brand perception that's coming in from not just social, but also from blogs, from forums, from Reddits of the world, and also like influence communities, etc. What do people really care about? If you are in the business of airlines, people really do care about flight conditions, flight crew, cabin conditions, Wi-Fi, meal, wine, and food and cleanliness, etc. So one key thing, like there's a whole list of items, but then suddenly turbulences got really popular. A lot of people are talking about turbulences right now. We've seen that happen in the last year, where there's a couple of accidents that happened with respect to turbulences. And here, essentially, there's a lot of negative conversation. So then as a brand, how do you come up with like your content strategy, uh, which talks about like what are the safety measures that you've done with respect to turbulence? How can you ensure that your airline is probably obviously best suited and safe for people not having to worry about like going through like turbulence and then just heading their roofs, heads on their roofs as well, right? So that is going to be one of the key ways. But also, this is, I think, going back to the pillar work from a reputation perspective. Like leadership was something, like the leadership of an airline, like why, like the spokesperson and how they are being perceived in media, or how they've been speaking about the industry and their customers in their own social handles, were something that was very, very important. So sorry about that. Yeah. And this gives you an idea in terms of like, okay, your leadership pillar has been getting a lot of engagement and reach. So how could you double down on that? And how could you ensure that people are like you, there is a trusted voice that's not just from like public medium, but then also from like a leadership standpoint that people are associating towards. And citizenship and workplace is also something that has been quite prominent. So you would be able to understand like which pillar is actually lacking right now. So our products and services are going down, our leadership is coming up. So then we would be able to go in and put our strategy behind it and then get those yeah, content layers up and the media briefs up for the journalists that we speak to or the content that we push towards as well. And finally, it's also in terms of like understanding like where do you stand with respect to your share of voice, what's really causing the draft, which this is a pretty straightforward one. Are there any questions, Sanchit, before I jump into the next section?
I think there's a question around like how, uh, while of course we want the discussions have been around building positive brand narratives with AI, it could be a case where competitors are influencing AI generated responses now with GEO, with negative narratives about a competing brand. So can AI measurement help detect this early if someone is working on that sort of a strategy, a competitor, and
Yeah.
mitigate the impact before it's too late?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the key things about a GAO platform and what they do is like to ensure that where these citations are coming from. Like where I think the biggest thing is like to understand like, okay, ensure that the same prompts are being fed in to all these different generative AI models, looking at what is the perception across each of those models. And then whenever there's a competition perception where you're being ranked low on a certain model, on a certain prompt, for instance, then you would be able to go into the sources of those conversations and understand that these are the sources that AI is pulling that information from. And are they being influenced by, like, if there's a ambush strategy that's being used by a certain competitor, then you would be able to know it. And then that's exactly where you would be able to counter it. You can come up with your narrative. And I think that would give you like the source citation and the citation deduction is going to be quite important. And then the narrative push is also going to be quite important. Those are the two aspects that I would highly encourage for any brand to keep a close eye on and even create alerts and executive briefs for you to have it on a weekly or even a daily basis if you are a high fast moving brand, for instance. Yeah. So just looking at how measuring business impact would look like, I think one of the most important thing is quantifying impact, and then going into like connect perception to performance, and then obviously proactively sharing and shaping those narrative as well. I know we are running up on time. I'm just going to really breeze through this. So here, what we are looking at is like enrichment. So when we talk about enrichments, understanding the context of your brand, your competition, and having an underlying data. So where we are bringing in multiple data sets together to have like what really moves the needle. Because we could be all operating in silos and then say, hey, we've done our narrative bit, but that doesn't really move up sales, for instance. So that's where we look at like predictive analysis, where it looks at, hey, if this is the trajectory that you're on, where you're looking at IPO earnings or press code international expansion. So here's how the 30 days look like. And here's like how the projected team trajectories, like for example, international expansion is really going to go up, while as press codes are going to go down. So then this helps you to understand, okay, hey, okay, I'm going to probably invest a lot more in this particular one. This gives you maybe a predictive analysis because this is understands very specifically from a brand. You can overlay that with your daily transactional data, your ad data, your supplemented with any other data that is going to move the needle and gives you insights into where you need to really focus on, right? I'm going to wrap this up. Last thing from my end. This is the last slide, I promise. So if I have to leave you guys with one thing, essentially, we know AI has really disrupted, but the key thing is like understanding it and being able to evolve and adding those elements like influence, GAO, etc. into your mix. So PR and measurement needs to obviously have multi-dimensions, multi-channel, and create obviously influence and visibility into the mix of it. Modern measurement will be across these four different pillars. It can be as simple like the business impact could be like a singular score, the visibility can be clubbed into a one singular metric as well. Perception and relevance is going to be key in terms of tracking how your narrative shape. And finally, Gen AI, or like what we call as GEO, intelligence is becoming an essential component of communication strategy. We can't ignore it. We have to be forerunning it and taking it on head on. Yeah. I know we are going to open it up for questions. So if there are any questions, please do ask it right now. I can hang in for another 5 minutes, possibly. But if you do have any feedback for us, we would love to hear from you. You could scan the QR code, let us know how this session went, and if there's anything that triggered your interest, we want to chat a bit more on this. Happy to do so as well. Sanchi and I would be really keen to engage with you guys more.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for all your questions in the engaging session. Again, any questions you have, please feel free to drop it in the chat in case you want to connect with us later. There's a link in the chat as well. If you guys could just give us your input on that, that would be superb. That would help us streamline the future sessions better. So, yeah.
I want to say thank you, Sanchi, and thank you, Ram, for phenomenal resources, the examples you shared, and would love to read more into it. I also want to let the team know, the group and the audience here, our next session will be on July 22nd. Our next mentor is based out of Michigan, in the US. So this will be later in the day. So about 5:30 in the evening, we'll send you a calendar invite. This is for July 22nd with Pratima Ramesh, who's from Makrak. So stay tuned for that information. But if you want to hold your calendar for 5:30 p.m. for now, July 22nd, please do. We look forward to having and continue this series. I also want to thank all our champion groups who've made this happen, and including my partner in crime, Nandita Lakshman from the practice. She and I have been leading this initiative together, and it's phenomenal to see this taking shape. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Okay, I think we've answered all questions, unless there's a last one, Ram.
Yeah, I think there are two left. So I think one is more around adoption. And I believe this is, I think, more around the adoption of AI is my guess, which I will take. So where do you see practitioners today from an Indian lens? And I do know, Ram, that you actually work across multiple geographies in APAC, China, Japan, and other regions as well. So where would you say?
I think there are definitely certain markets which are pretty high on AI adoption, especially on the communications front. We've seen some really key brands who have forayed into utilization of AI in a much more extensive way, like using MCPs in terms of like connecting different data sets together. I would say India is definitely one of them where we've seen really, like, especially with like the GCCs in India, they've really been one of the forerunners. I think Sanchi, you work closely with a couple of them, so you would know that. And I think the second biggest one that I would say is Singapore and Australia. So these are two other markets where, at least from an APAC level, I think the adoption and I would say they would probably be in the early adopter stage of like AI efficiency, even in like PR and comms.
Got it. And just the last question to wrap it all up. I
Yeah.
think, there's, as you know, that there are a lot of guidelines now for regulated companies or listed companies in India. So how do we optimize the GEO bit for the listed companies where we're mandated to use certain words as per regulatory requirements? And
Yeah.
these words may not always be positive considering the requirements which exist,
Yeah.
and may not be aligned with the perception which we as a brand or an agency might want to, put across for the brand. But again,
Yeah.
because of the regulatory requirement which exists, we have to work along those guidelines. So what would your suggestion be on that?
Yeah, I think we had a similar kind of use case with a couple of companies in pharma as well as with in the financial sectors like insurance, for instance. And there's a lot of regulation that's out there. So in these scenarios, the key one to really be able to utilize for GEO perspectives like visibility, and then number two is also like relevance on the conversation. So one key thing is like understanding like how are you being perceived on those prompts whenever people are talking about it, and in certain scenarios, like for this particular pharma, they understood like there was a few blogs which were taking them on a downhill, which are basically from practitioners, like general practitioners in the medical space. So they had to come up with a strategy of like engaging with other general practitioners and getting that content up, and that created a narrative to go on. So it's more in terms of like if we understand your use case better, we would be able to guide you a bit more. But it's more in terms of like understanding what kind of narratives have been pushed there, which is not aligned to your business. So then we could understand like where these narratives are stemming from, what are the sources, and if there is a counter response strategy, something that we could build across it. And either it could be with the same sources, or it could be with a different source, which can go and push up the prominence of your particular brand in those specific GPTs or channels, or even like social media, for instance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ram. Even though, I mean, we work closely together and I was just helping moderate this. This was a very informative session for me as well. Thank you so much, Deepti, for setting it up for us. And we do really appreciate the opportunity to interact with so many people, and the questions were just so engaging. So it was a very enjoyable session for us as well. That's a wrap from our side. But again, in case anyone has any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or anywhere else, and we would be happy to continue these conversations. We love talking industry and how it's changing. So, yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Sue. And thanks, Anchi. Thanks, everybody. See you
Thank you,
guys on
everyone.
July 27th.
Cheers.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.